So I will ask the chiefs, do you want to kind of go down the list of questions after you give a little intro, or would you want to just pick some and you can each deal with them?
I'm fine. If you just want to ask the questions, we can
Okay.
kind of go about them as you ask them.
Okay. I'll let you each give a, like 1 or 2 minute intro about yourselves, anything you want to say about your department, and then we'll just head right on into the questions. So alphabetically, Chief Morgan, we'll start with you.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name is Dean Morgan.
Oh, you froze up.
I'll jump in while he's doing
Okay,
that.
thank you.
I'm Russ Johnson. I'm the chief of police here with the city of Salida. I've been with Salida about 17 years. I'm sure a lot of you remember Chief Terry Clark. He was the chief here for about 10 years. And I worked under him in various roles. I've been a patrol officer, kind of worked my way up through sergeant, lieutenant, and then was selected as the police chief about 2.5 years ago now. I've got a wife who's a kindergarten teacher here at Longfellow, and I've got a 8th grader who's crazy into golf and is actually really good and travels all over the state playing golf. And I've got twins that are in 7th grade, all girls. So it's a challenging household I have. I grew up with 3 sisters, so I'm used to it.
Great.
Other than that, we've got a department of, we've got 18 patrol officers. That consists of 2 females, and the rest are males. We've got 2 code enforcement officers, admin assistant, and then we contract through the sheriff's office for a records person. So total of about 22 personnel within the agency.
Great. Okay, I'm trying to look. Okay, I think we got Dean back here.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Dean.
hopefully you can hear me. I don't know what was going on there. The internet must have had a hiccup or something, but I'm back now.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been chief of Buena Vista Police Department since July. I started my law enforcement career in 2000. I was hired, worked the first 9 years of my career with the Park County Sheriff's Office. Came to Buena Vista in 2010. And I was a sergeant here for several years. And then this summer, after 24 years as police chief, Jimmy Tidwell retired. And I was his replacement. So still in the learning curve phase. I'm a 5th generation Colorado native. I was born in Colorado Springs. And the Buena Vista Police Department, when we're fully staffed, we're 11 patrol officers. That includes the chief, 2 sergeants, and a detective, and also our administrative assistant. And right now we're down 3 positions, but we've got 2 in the academy. So we just finished a hiring process. Hopefully we'll get that 3rd one going here pretty soon too.
Okay, great. Well, I think I've put in our email, in November, our last league presentation was by the Alliance in terms of domestic abuse, rape, sexual assault. So part of the reason here was a follow-up as to how our law enforcement deals with them. So I'll just jump in with one of those questions. How do you work with mental health professionals in mental health situations? And
I'll start off. So Sol Vista is the one of the main mental health providers up here that we use. So when we encounter somebody that has some mental health issues, that's one of the first resources we direct them to. I think part of your other question is related, or another part of this question is related to our training and things like that.
right.
We try to get a lot of training for ourselves, for our officers on recognizing people with mental disabilities. Just as an example, earlier this year, all of our officers took autism and disability awareness for first responders. Some of our officers will specialize in those areas. Officer DiGirolamo just went to, she's our school resource officer, so she works with kids and special needs kids a lot too. She did a training earlier this year for crisis hostage negotiation, and all of our officers are going to be taking what's called CIT training in the coming weeks, which stands for Crisis Intervention Training, which helps us recognize some things for people in need. Sometimes someone with a mental health issue might appear like somebody under the influence of drugs or things like that. So these trainings will help us to differentiate and get them the help they need.
Great. Chief Johnson?
So a lot of it's similar, kind of what we do with what Buena Vista does. We've been approached by Vista. There's a lot of communities that have responders in the cars with the officers. We don't necessarily have the need or the call volume to justify that. It's quite expensive to kind of run that program. So we do have a program where if we go to a call, they have 2 crisis response people, and we can call them and say, hey, we've got a mental health situation, and they'll send us one of the 2 crisis response people. It's been working out. We started that January of this year. We keep a log of every time that we've contacted somebody on a mental health related call where we've kind of asked Vista to come out and participate. We go back and review that periodically to see if it's working with Vista and what we can do to address or change the program. We have a very detailed policy that kind of covers mental health response and what officers can and can't do. Being that the hospital is in our jurisdiction, there's a new thing called an M.5 hold. And what that means is a law enforcement officer can transport that person to the hospital, and the ER counts as a facility. So we may get Saguache, Western Fremont County, Buena Vista, Chaffee County can utilize the hospital to drop somebody off. Our hospital does not have security, unfortunately. So they kind of call us and try to get us to come over and be their security. We've kind of given them some pushback on that because most hospitals you go to have their own private security. But we have to be real delicate when they do call us because they're there for a mental health reason. That's other than to maybe show up and try to talk to the person. Sometimes that works. We can facilitate Vista getting there quicker. But that in the last 6 months, we've had several people kind of dumped off here by Western Fremont or Saguache, and then it becomes Salida's problem. We do take a ton of training. I can talk about that later when we talk about more trainings. But CIT training, it's a 40-hour course that our officers go to. And we actually have college drama students that kind of put on the class. They're outstanding at acting the roles. And then the people get put in to a situation where somebody's experiencing mental health through the drama part. And the officer has to kind of de-escalate the situation. And then their peers actually watch them while they're doing it. And then once the scenario's over, they can actually critique each other and talk about it and kind of come up with, hey, that worked. Hey, that wasn't a good thing to say or do. So it's real good to have that officer on officer critique in that situation. We were doing really good. We had about 80% of our staff in that class, and then COVID hit and we can't have the class right now with all the restrictions. So that's kind of been put on hold until next year. But we should have everybody up hopefully on that class within the end of 21.
Okay, and to be clear, CIT is crisis intervention training?
Yes, it's crisis intervention training. Yep.
Okay, so along with the training, or to follow up with that, in terms of domestic violence and rape, what's your procedure in that situation, and what kind of training do you get? And since we're here, we'll go ahead and start with you, Chief Johnson.
Okay. So we take, the city's been really good about training. Our officers attend over 200 hours per guy of training a year. For a small agency, that's outstanding. And quite frankly, for a large agency, most of them get even less training than the smaller agencies, just based on manpower and call volume and things like that. So we focus on a whole magnitude of training, from firearms arrest control, case law updates. I mean, it goes on and on. I can cover that more in a minute. But specifically to domestic violence, everybody takes domestic violence training in the academy. And then once you get to your agency, it continues with constant case law updates from the DA's office. We have trainings in-house where we actually do scenarios and people will respond, and an officer will play the victim, an officer will play the suspect, and we'll actually go through and do trainings on the premise here at the PD. We have a domestic violence team that we have in the community. It's Chaffee County wide. We participate in that. So we have monthly meetings to talk with the DA's office, with other partners, like other police departments. There's the domestic violence team that's here in town that puts people up and houses people that if somebody comes to them and doesn't want to come to the police, they can go to the coalition and the coalition will help them. If we need to talk to the coalition, we have to have permission from the actual victim to kind of go through and talk with them. But that whole system, we work well together with them. We have releases that we can sign to get information from the victim, but we use them quite often. Even if we send a case to court, it doesn't necessarily mean that the victim won't work with that coalition. A lot of times that coalition is in play, whether somebody doesn't want to report it or if they do report it, end up in a court case.
Okay.
Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah. Chief Morgan?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, we have a couple new officers that are in the academy. So once they complete the academy, they have a 14-week field training program before they can go to solo status. So interesting scenario reference, for example, sexual assault and domestic violence. Those can be officers hit the road with just a, say again?
You were cutting out from me. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there must be an unstable connection here at the PD or something. But if one of our officers were to, one of these brand new officers were to encounter a sexual assault type case, we have some pretty strict protocols in place with our policies. Also with the district attorney's office, in the past, they've had a sex assault protocol, which we follow. So there's officers within our department that have some very specialized training regarding that. So even a brand new officer, if they were to get a case like that, they can take the initial report and then they notify a supervisor, and almost immediately we get the investigator involved, which has a lot of specialized training for sex assaults. And part of that protocol is that we also notify the district attorney's office. So we get a lot of eyes on the cases like that initially. People are also allowed to, in Colorado, report sexual assault and remain anonymous. In other words, they have the option to go down to the hospital and have a SANE exam done, but not proceed further with the investigation if they don't want to. It is different.
Oh, you froze again. Dang. Chief Johnson, maybe you can
I can jump in.
Yeah,
So
about this, the interaction with the SANE nurses, the sexual assault nurse examiners.
I think he's back.
Okay.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we must have unstable internet here. Yep, I just got a thing on my screen. It says your internet's unstable. Anyways, yeah, with the same nurses, we work with them, and our investigator works with them in that process. So there's a lot of eyes are put on those cases, and they're very serious cases. And domestic violence is a little bit different. They don't give officers a whole lot of discretion in making an arrest. If we have probable cause, usually on a domestic violence case, we do make an arrest. And one of the concerns with domestic violence is if there's an abused partner because of bullying or intimidation tactics, they might be afraid to pursue charges when it's important and necessary. So that law takes the burden off of them to have to make that choice. And it's the state of Colorado essentially that pursues charges in domestic violence. So kind of covered a couple different topics there, but hopefully that kind of answers your questions.
Okay.
And we have a sexual assault response team here in Chaffee County. And that's a coordinated effort between Salida, Buena Vista, and Chaffee County. And that team, there's a coordinator, there's a SANE nurse, and they have a monthly meeting to kind of go over protocols or tweak things. And I know we've gone through a couple of different administrators in the last few months of the actual SANE team, but we're kind of in a spot now where we've got a good team, somebody that's reliable and kind of somebody that wants to kind of do this. We're a couple of years ago.
Okay. You kind of, I couldn't hear you for a minute, so maybe it's my internet. But so Chief Johnson, what can the departments do to decrease the illegal drug traffic coming into our county? And a couple of things related to that, common illegal drugs. And have you seen any increase since we've had legalized marijuana? I'll start with you, Chief Johnson.
I would say our number one drugs in the area are meth and heroin. It's pretty much been that way since I started here. Heroin kind of took a dive 7-8 years ago because of prescription pills were so popular, and you could get the prescription pills hundreds at a time from doctors. They've gone to a new network now where everything's online. You can't get people used to steal the actual pads from the doctor's office and write their own scripts and take them to Walmart or a pharmacy and get hundreds of pills. And now there's a tracking system set up by the DEA and the federal government to where people can't doctor shop. If somebody goes to Dr. A and asks for pills and they go to Dr. B to get more pills, that gets tracked, so they can't do it anymore. So since then, we've seen heroin go back up. And I mean, it's a catch-22. You limit one thing and they move on to the next. But unfortunately, something that I have heartburn with is our state keeps taking the harder drugs. So marijuana, we've made that legal. It's been that way for years now. We are seeing an increase in DUIs. In the cities, they're seeing an increase in money laundering and theft and things like that from the marijuana. But down here locally, all we're getting is an increase in DUIs, people driving under the influence of marijuana. The kind of caveat to that is we've kind of taken a step back and looked at drugs and don't want to make them what they are. We keep making them less and less. The penalties are less and less when they go to court. So years ago, you'd go to jail for possession of heroin, and it was a felony case. Now we're down to where it's a ticketable offense. It's a misdemeanor. So you could potentially just get a ticket for possessing marijuana and go away. Now there is some limits, ounces or grams. If you have more than 2 grams to 4 grams, it increases penalties. If you have ounces, it increases penalties. But what we're seeing here locally is I've been a part of the Chaffee County drug court team for the last 12 years. And we work with the courts in that, we work with probation in that. And the goal of that program is to get people off the substance. So we send them to various treatments, and the average person unfortunately takes 8 trips to treatment, according to the stats, before they actually get off the substance. So if we get random guy, put him in drug court, the success rate's not high. We have had several graduate drug court. A couple are still sober. Several have gone back to narcotics 6-12 months after they've graduated the program. But with that taking 8 times per person, it just eats up a lot of resources because we keep sending the same people to the same rehabs over and over. But with the courts making it the way they have, our ability on the street to get somebody to help the drug task force is kind of declined. If somebody has a felony charge over their head, they're more likely to come to us and say, hey, yeah, I'd like to help out. I'd like to get my charge reduced. When it's a misdemeanor, they're looking at less time on probation. They know they're probably not going to jail for it, so they're less likely to help out and work for us on the drug task force. Our goal, and something I've got a lot of time to talk with Judge Murphy on, he's our felony district court judge, is as police officers, you see the people that are using drugs and they commit various other crimes, theft, and a lot of that's drug driven. It's the dealers and the people that are distributing it that we need to really hammer. Because if they're not distributing it, then we don't have the drugs going around the communities. Murphy's done a pretty good job. At first, we were getting people on probation for distribution. The last few cases, we've gotten 4 years of DOC time. That really helps if somebody's dealing drugs and they actually have a hammer over their head saying, hey, if you get caught, you're going to go away. That really decreases the want and for people to want to sell drugs. So if we could focus more on the actual going after the dealers and the rehab like we're trying to do now on the users, I think that's the appropriate approach. But the more and more we legalize or make the penalties less for the drugs, the less consequences people have, the more they're just like whatever with it. You've probably seen Washington, they're actually making it like crazy up there because you can now possess illegal drugs. I hope we don't go there in Colorado, but it's a trend we're kind of leaning towards.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dean.
Morgan? Thank you. I didn't even know we had a drug court. Always thought we should. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. He covered most of the thoughts that I would also echo. I'm on the drug task force, and the BVPD has members on the drug task force, and they stay pretty active. I think one of our frustrations is, again, we're seeing the same types of drugs, heroin and methamphetamine. In the 9 years I worked in Park County, I think I saw heroin one time. And then since coming to Buena Vista, especially over the last few years with the opioid epidemic, I've seen heroin. Our officers have seen it all over the place. Just about a month or so ago, one of our officers, we gave him a letter of commendation for finding a girl who had overdosed in a car and was near death. And he brought her some life-saving assistance with EMS. But I think one of our frustrations is, or mine anyways, is just seeing repeat offenders. As far as how the police deal with the drug problem, I like to educate people that it's not just the police's job, it's a community job to deal with the drug problem. We do need help from the citizens. We need some understanding and assistance. An aspect of that is, we get citizens that want a safe community, a safe neighborhood for their kids. And if they get a drug house in the community, and we have a few here in town, citizens call in and they give us information about what they're seeing and the types of vehicles coming and going. And, we've gotten calls from people very angry saying, this is still going on at this house. Nothing's being done about it. You guys aren't doing your job. We can go back and show reports that we've arrested the dealers from that house 4 times and they just get let go again by the courts. And that's a problem. And that's something that the community might be able to help with by maybe tracking, how often repeat offenders are let go. And if there's no consequences, sometimes there's no incentive to change poor behavior.
Okay. So in light of some of the things that have been happening in the big cities, what is the quote restraint of choice when one has to protect themselves or other people in terms of restraining someone you're trying to arrest, basically dealing chokeholds, ketamines, whatever. What do our officers get trained to do? I'll go ahead with you, Chief Morgan, since you're on screen.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's no catch-all restraint because every situation is different. So the training we go through is there's different arrest control systems, and then the techniques of those systems are governed by state and federal law, as well as our department policies. So the arrest control system that Buena Vista Police uses is called Krav Maga. It's an Israeli-based arrest control system. It teaches a lot of techniques for officers to defend themselves or other people. It gives us a lot of tools. We have things like taser. A lot of the tools, we have what we call a use of force paradigm, which is a kind of a mindset of ways we can escalate or de-escalate within the use of force continuum to use the appropriate techniques and tactics for the situation. And we're given a lot of training on ideas like what's reasonable and necessary, which is a legal term. For me, might not be reasonable and necessary to a smaller female officer. She might need to use a higher degree of force to make an arrest or defend herself than, say, myself, who's a little bit bigger person. As far as chokeholds, I know that's been big in the media. No police department that I know of has really ever allowed chokeholds in this century. What a lot of people, I think, are referring to in regards to chokeholds is what we would call the carotid restraint. A chokehold is a respiratory restraint, which cuts off the air, which no department uses that. Other departments have used carotid restraints, which can cut off the blood flow to the brain and choke a person unconscious. In the Krav Maga system and our SOPs, we don't allow strikes to the neck. We don't allow chokeholds. The respiratory restraint was in our policies, but with the passage of the police reform bill, that was taken. So we do not teach that anymore. And we do not use that anymore. Outside of that, and I don't know, let me know if I missed something as part of your question. Hopefully that kind of gives you some idea of
Okay, yeah.
what that process is.
Okay. Chief Johnson?
Yeah, again, a lot of the stuff similar with what Dean's spoken about. We have very specific policies related to use of force, and that reasonable and necessary is like the main caveat of it. So if an officer is using force, they have to justify it. It has to be reasonable and necessary for the situation they're in. And like Dean said, if you have a female officer with a 6'5", 300-pound male, her using a taser right off the bat may be reasonable and necessary, where if a male officer of the similar size shows up, it may not be. So it's all independent to each situation. And the guys do a good job of de-escalation. We attend several de-escalation courses, and the goal when we get there is to try to de-escalate it and get somebody to cooperate. If we can get somebody to cooperate, turn around, put their hands behind their back, that's the ultimate win for everybody. There's no force used. And I would say the majority of the cases end up that way. We do, if we get a complaint, we have a process where somebody can file, we have 3 different outcomes. So you can file a complaint where, hey, can you just talk to the officer about they were rude? And if somebody says something like that, we'll pull the officer in, watch the body cam footage and say, yeah, you probably didn't need to say that. You were a little rude on that one. If somebody comes in and says, hey, your officer assaulted me, or your officer used excessive force, then with everybody having body cameras nowadays, it's wonderful because we can go back, view the footage, and actually see what took place in real time. We've had body cams since we demoed them at the summer of 2017. We've had them since. Everybody wears one, including myself. If I'm out doing actual police work and not office work, I'll have my body cam on. And that's to protect the officers, protect the citizen, and also the city in any kind of litigation. But we can review that footage. We'll go through if they violated some sort of policy, then we're going to handle it. We don't want officers that are like that on our department. So we would definitely look at the situation. If the officer did wrong, then they're either going to get suspended, sent to more training, or let go. But since we've had the body cams, since I've been chief, we haven't had one use of force complaint that has been sustained. That's been since July of 17. We haven't had one that's been sustained. So
Good for you. Yep.
It's something you hear a lot about nationally, but I think here locally, being in a smaller agency, having the body cams, I think that really helps kind of deter any of that behavior.
Chief Morgan, anything to add to that? Do you all have all body cams in BB?
Yeah, we sure do. I believe we were the first agency to get them back in, I think about 2016 or 2015, we got ours. And that was under Chief Tidwell. Now with the new police reform bill, all agencies are going to be required to have body cameras. Most of our officers love them. I wear them when I go out and I assist on calls and things like that, because complaints, they do drop. Unfortunately, when you're a first responder and you deal with people under the influence of alcohol and drugs and volatile situations, sometimes they want to punitively complain against an officer. And unfortunately, there have been a lot of false complaints made, and that goes away with body cameras. So it's a great tool. It's a great thing to have for accountability. So, yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure you guys can answer this. You probably can. Because do both of the BV and Salida use the county jail when they need to? And if so, is there a cost for that? And those who go there for DUIs, do you know how often they have to go for testing after leaving jail and what the charge is for that? I'll start with you, Chief Morgan.
Yeah, so by statute, the county jail is run by the sheriff's office. So if we arrest somebody and take them to jail, we have to go to Salida and book them into the jail. Sheriff Speeze would be the one to know more about the fees and everything,
Okay.
but and the courts also. So on our end, the town itself, I don't think we really have specific fees associated to arresting somebody. The jail has, when someone posts bond, there's some fees for them to bond out. And then once they make an appearance in front of a judge, there are certain mandated fees that the courts can incur. And I know sometimes they waive those fees too, based on like if a person has financial issues. It's a bond condition. I believe it's still a bond condition that, for example, on a DUI, which is specific to the question, that the person does have to go for a monitored sobriety. Same with drug charges, to make sure that they're not continuing to use. And that's part of their bond conditions for them to be out on bond. And there are fees associated with that. I'm not, fees have been waived or minimized based off of a person's financial capabilities.
Okay, Chief Johnson, you were breaking up a bit at the end there, Chief Morgan.
Okay.
Same thing. The statute dictates that the county has to provide the jail. The only time we get charged is if we had a municipal case and the judge ordered jail time for somebody, or if we had a municipal warrant and the person got picked up on that warrant and they couldn't bond out. Previous to 2018, we used to have to pay that quite often. We'd have a municipal warrant, somebody would get arrested, and then they couldn't post the $500 bond, so they'd stay a day or two in jail. That was costing us $40 a day for housing people. So we re-looked at it, and the judge here municipally just gives PR bonds. So if somebody gets arrested, they go up, get fingerprinted, photographed at the jail, and then they get released on a PR with a new court date. So it's a pretty easy system now, and it doesn't cost the city anything at this point.
That's only for kind of nonviolent type warrants or something like that, or?
Yeah, most of the stuff that gets written into city court would be traffic,
Okay.
some small
I didn't know
theft,
that.
just little minuscule cases.
Okay. So what do you
Code
guys
violation.
think is the biggest problem in your town, law enforcement wise, I guess? And how do we handle it now, and how can we do better?
I think it may be different for Dean. I think our biggest problem is staffing. We go through staff quite regularly. When you have seasoned guys that are in town, like I'll speak about Mike Travis. He's my senior patrolman. He has almost 9 years on. And when you have a guy with 9 years on, taking a call, taking a case, the level of service you get as a citizen is a lot better than a guy that's brand new. They tend to know more. They can answer more of your questions. They're kind of seasoned. They are usually a little less or a little more compassionate. When you first get into law enforcement, you try to put on this, I'm a tough guy, I'm a cop, like, look at me. And that goes away after a couple of years when you realize that doesn't really help you on the street. So I think, like, for instance, if we get a call at Walmart Safeway and somebody shoots out a picture of a vehicle that was used or a picture of a suspect, a guy that's been here for a while routinely knows that person. And they're like, hey, that's John Smith, where my new guys will spend 3 hours trying to figure out who it is before we even get to that level. So keeping and retaining staff is a big thing. I'm probably losing Mike Travis here in a couple of weeks. He's going to go to the Metro and work for Lone Tree. Leaving us after almost 9 years. He's at 50. He's probably making about $62,000 a year. He will lateral up to Lone Tree and within 2 years be making $85,000. So when you look at the cost of living to be down in this area, what other larger agencies pay, it's kind of hard to retain people. And when we're constantly rotating in young officers, it's challenging to keep the service up at a level that we would like to kind of give to the community, and also cut down on the wasted time of trying to figure out who's who and learn the community when these seasoned officers already know that stuff. So that's one of our biggest challenges. Of course, crime and all that stuff falls within that realm, but we need officers on the street to be able to combat that.
Okay, thank you. Chief Morgan?
Yeah, I'll speak to our biggest challenges externally and internally. Externally, I would think one of the biggest challenges in Buena Vista is substance abuse. That would include illegal narcotics as well as alcohol and marijuana and things like that. I would say 80 to 90% of our crimes, the suspect is under the influence of some type of a substance, whether it's alcohol or something else. So that's a big issue. Resources in a rural area, it's hard to find resources sometimes for people like that for treatment. There's the closest detox facility, which is a huge problem in my opinion, is in Alamosa. So if we have to detox somebody, we can't take them to the jail. The idea of that jail being a drunk tank is not accurate. The jail is for somebody who's been charged criminally. So if someone just goes on a big old bender and hasn't broken any laws, but they're not safe to be left alone, we have to drive where we're closer to New Mexico than we are to our hometown here. And that's not ideal. And with a lot of the summer festivals and things, alcohol and other substances are a big part of that. And that's a big problem in the community. Internally, I would agree with Chief Johnson. It's retention of good employees and hiring of good employees. Just the culture in this country, there's been a lot of negative attitudes and some pretty rough changes that have come down the line for law enforcement. There's not a lot of incentive for people to be police officers. I've read statistics about officers in Colorado, just across the state, just hanging it up and retiring. Seattle, which has had a lot of problems with this, and there's a lot of cries for defunding the police. I think I heard something like 140 officers have quit in the last couple of months. So things like that, people are going to look at the paycheck and then look at the job and the things that police are having to go through. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to find another career. Cost of living up here is pretty high too. I always tell guys, it's like, man, that might not make as much as a city cop, but the quality of life is really great up here. There's a lot of good people, really great scenery, great place to raise your kids, but there's an expense associated with that. And if you're a young officer out of the academy and you want to start a family, sometimes looking at that paycheck versus cost of living is going to be a factor, and that makes it hard.
Yeah, I hear you. And
I
good
will add,
answer. That's difficult. Go ahead, Chief.
I was going to add real quick, Sol Vista has been working on some grant funding. They did get approved. So there will be some sort of a detox type facility that's being put on the campus of Heart of the Rockies.
Okay,
They
great.
should break some sort of ground on that next year.
That's good news. Yeah, because it takes 2 officers to take them to Alamosa, doesn't it?
No, you can take one
One.
officer.
Okay.
If it's a guy and a guy, it's not a big deal. If it's a male and a female, we just require that the officer has their body camera on while they're driving. That way everything's recorded and there's no allegations. But Alamosa, we've pretty much quit using them as much as we can, just because now they've required you to have to go pick the person up afterwards. A lot of them were getting let out, and then it became Alamosa's problem, and they kind of got tired of that. So we have to go pick them up now.
Got it. So some members of the community have concerns regarding a local group known as the Chaffee Patriots. So what do you know about them, and do you have any concerns about this group, or is this just hype or something?
I know there's some group on Facebook that calls themselves the Chaffee County Patriots. We haven't had any issues with them since they've started their little organization. I don't really know too much other than they're a Facebook group. They post stuff. Ark Valley Voice did some sort of story involving that a few months back, but we haven't had any issues. We tend not to get too involved unless we have issues, complaints, and we haven't had any of that.
Chief Morgan?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of talk about the group. I've followed them on Facebook for a while there, and then thought better of it. I was asked in the Ark Valley Voice article what they were about. I read the definition from their webpage, and it said they were about, I can't remember the specifics, but about defending the Constitution and standing up for their rights, which I don't think any police officer would have a problem with that. That a lot of us, that's our oath. So I think some of the concerns were feelings that maybe this group or maybe certain people in this group are going beyond some of those patriotic ideals into militia type ideologies. And I've only heard rumors about that. I haven't heard anything specific. Unfortunately, this last political season was very charged. So we'd hear a lot of rumors. People would have a Trump rally on the corner of East Main and Highway 24 here in Buena Vista every weekend in October, September and October. And we heard a lot of rumors about that. I had a guy say that people were out there pointing M16s at people and things like that. And there was just no truth to that, because obviously that would be illegal and we wouldn't allow that. I came down once and just in plain clothes observed what was going on. I didn't see anything concerning. There's a lot of people honking horns, people waving flags. Some people didn't like the message apparently, and they'd throw up the middle finger. But outside of that, we had no problems generated by any of that.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I guess a question I might have that I've heard from other people is, we have the freedom to belong to various groups, including political groups, and certainly we could not, nobody would want to deny a law enforcement person that same freedoms in terms of joining, whatever political group they wanted. Would the Chaffee Patriots be treated just the same as the Democrats or Republicans or the Green Party or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. Our policy actually says that, we treat people equally. And it's interesting, when I talked to the Ark Valley Voice, I mentioned that, there's some pretty strong political rhetoric on the What's Happening pages too. So we want our officers to be careful about being involved in things like that, because when we wear the badge, we're apolitical. We don't pick a side. Officers are, of course, allowed to have their own political beliefs and things like that, but that can't translate over into the line of duty. And if it does, if we saw, hopefully someone will grab that phone here.
It's okay.
Looks like they got it. If we caught an officer that was, actively engaging in something while in uniform for one political side or the other, that wouldn't be tolerated.
Okay. Anything to add, Chief Johnson?
Yeah, we just have pretty strict policies in place for what guys can and can't do. A lot of it focuses on work time. Absolutely no political talk or affiliation stuff during work. There is a little bit of stuff that comes out of the city. City Hall contacted us a few times over this last season, just kind of asking what pages our officers are on, things like that. I honestly couldn't tell you every page that any one of my guys is on because I don't have the time to go through all that and see who's part of what page. But I know our guys follow our policy, and they're very careful on what they join just so it doesn't give off perception in the community.
Great. So since we're talking about controversial issues, with the recent passage of the Extreme Risk Protection Law, how are you and your department responding, or have you had to, if a request is made to use this law?
Find the paperwork.
Uh,
We've got a very, oh, good.
I was just asking who
Dave.
wanted to go first. I think that was you volunteering.
We've got a pretty detailed policy. Everything we do, we detail on policy. That way it protects the situation that we're writing a policy about. We've got a policy that dictates that we have a coordinator. So if we do get an extreme risk protection deal that's called into us, we have a coordinator that will review it. The coordinator then goes and talks with the team. And then the team, if necessary, would talk with the SWAT team, other people that need to be involved. Just depending, it's a very delicate situation, and we're not going to basically put people in harm's way to serve something. So let's say we got a guy that's extreme and we get this protection order. We're not just going to go knock on a door and say, here you go. We're going to do it properly to keep everybody safe, including the person inside. So service is a vague term on how they label service. If the notice is attached to somebody's door, technically that's a service. So there's ways to kind of do it so it's not in chaos. You know what I mean? We're trying to avoid that. So I would say 99% of these are going to be handled by the sheriff's office. But on the off chance that we do get something, we have a strict guideline policy in place that details step by step how we're going to handle it. And we're definitely going to follow that policy to a T. And we, as police officers, probably the only time we will try to get one is if we have somebody that's making active threats to a school. If somebody's threatening to shoot up a high school, middle school, elementary school, and we can prove a case, that's the only time you would see us at Salida PD even think about going after one. It's pretty dependent on the person. You have to go through the court system to get it. Does that kind of answer your question? Kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Okay, Chief Morgan, anything to add?
Yeah, just real quick. This is our policy right here. SOP 430. Extreme risk protection orders. It was issued on June 18th, 2020. And we sat down with our town attorney, Jeff Parker, and his law firm, and we drafted it up. There's been a lot of talk about this. There's been a lot of rhetoric. I did some research before I came here. Since this was passed, it said 73 cases were filed in 19 counties. Of those, only 29 have resulted in the issuance of an order. There was a high profile case where the order was misused and it was quickly tossed out and the person was sued. So of 5.759 million people in Colorado, only 29 issuances. So I think part of the concern with this order was that it was going to be government overreach to take people's guns from them or things like that. And we would have that concern too. We don't want to be a part of, circumventing people's rights to due process or taking away their Second Amendment rights. But I think just based on the data, it doesn't seem like that's what's happening. And like Chief Johnson said, the intent of this order is really for public safety. There's a pretty strong vetting process in our policy, which would include going through the town attorney and the courts to make sure that back in 2006, I was a first responder to the Platte Canyon High School shooting. So like Chief Johnson said, I'll second that. If we think there's a threat towards our kids, I think the police and the public, we're all on the same page that that person's not going to have guns if you're going to threaten a school.
Okay, thank you. So we're getting close to our closing time, and we have some, I didn't get through all these questions, but there's some specific ones that people on the meeting have that are kind of quick answers. Is dealing heroin here a felony? And
Yes.
any,
Dealing any kind of narcotic is a felony. Heroin, meth, cocaine, prescription pills.
and marijuana, if you're selling marijuana outside the retail stores, is that correct?
Marijuana is kind of convoluted because it deals with amounts and
Okay, yeah.
yeah, and you can give it away technically, and it's real sketchy, so we don't even mess with that.
Okay. And which court do drug cases and dealers go to? City, county, district court?
District court. They usually appear in front of Judge Murphy.
Okay, okay.
So, and that's district court if it's a distribution case. If it's just a possession case now, with it being a misdemeanor, it'll go through Judge Alderton's court, which he's retiring, so we'll have a new judge in January.
Okay, I was just
And then-
talking about him this morning.
And the DA's office and the defense team and all that, they decide who ends up on drug court.
Okay. So in terms of your department's budgets, what's your budget, and is it equitable with other police departments in towns of this size? And where is your funding come from?
I'll jump in on that real quick, guys. I saw Libby's in the meeting. I think I'll let Libby
Yeah.
answer that one. Yeah, I wanted to plug something our town just started. It's called ClearGov. It's a website you can go to for transparency. It's CLEARGOV.com. And you type in town of Buena Vista, Colorado, and you can look at our budget. The town's budget was $10,195,551. $2,549,080 was given to public safety, which includes fire department. So police got $1,343,237. And for comparison, rec department got $1,287,522. Water was $1,610,986, etc. So all of that's on our ClearGov page with pie charts and everything. It's pretty cool. Not all of that is tax money. I talked to our town administrator this morning. He said that, for example, we get over $1 million in grants and things like that.
The police department gets $1 million in grants? Or the town?
Oh, I wish. No, I'm talking about the town in general.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we do get some grants. We have a CDOT grant that helps us with the DUI patrols and things like that. But no, if we got $1 million in grants, I'd be driving a nicer patrol car.
All right, Chief Johnson?
So our budget, let me pull it up, wrong page. Our budget for next year is $2,394,947. That is about $1,300 more than it was last year. So not much of an increase. We don't really look at other agencies and compare when doing budgeting. We just kind of look at, here's Salida, here's what we need for the year. Just looking at similar size department, Gunnison, their budget's around 3.5 million, just a little over 3.5 million, but they also have a dispatch center that they run, and we run our dispatch out of the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office. If we were to add a dispatch that was 24/7 just for Salida, we'd probably be around 750,000 a year to make that work. We've kind of crunched numbers on that in the past just to see if it's feasible. And I think the difference between us and Gunnison is strictly salary when you look at it after that. They're pretty competitive with some of the metro area places. So that difference of 250 would be mostly salary. As far as grants and stuff, if we write tickets and stuff, I think somebody may have had a question in this group about that. That any ticket we write just goes into the general fund, and it just offsets expenses for the city as a whole. There's certainly towns like Morrison, Colorado, who write They did that 9 News deal on Morrison. They write over $2 million in tickets a year. That is what I would consider trying to fund things out of policing, and that's not what we try to do here in Salida. We try to use traffic when we have time to slow vehicles down, to bring awareness to traffic laws. So we don't write a lot of tickets. We may, in a year's time, bring in $100,000 in total court revenue. That includes tickets, that includes court fees, theft fees, all that stuff, all in one. So it's not something we're doing just for revenue here in Salida. We have gotten grants. What we try to do with grants is if there's items we'd like to have that are obtainable in a grant, like we just got a $26,000 grant for electronic tickets. So we have electronic ticket systems. That was all grant funded. We got 20,000 from Colorado Post to improve our firing range. We've got about 65,000 to get all new SWAT equipment. We combined with another agency and split that because if we combine, we can usually get more opportunities. And then for the last couple of years, our SWAT team through the South Central Regional Grant has gotten a robot that was around $20,000 and different technologies to make it so we're not sending people in now. We're sending technology into a scene with cameras, and we can see stuff and still stay back and away from the problem.
Great. Well, we're about at our end of our time, but do you gentlemen have anything you'd want citizens that are on this call to know that we can help you in your job, or we need to spread the word to our other citizens?
No, the citizens up here are great. Chief Tidwell always reminded me what a great place this is to work. It's rare. I usually go out to lunch 2 or 3 times a week, and frequently people come up and pay for my meal. Same with my fellow officers, as just to show a gratitude. So there's a lot of police support in our communities, and we'd like to think that that's because of public trust, because our departments try to treat the public well, and that the public, in turn treats us well, and there's a lot of mutual respect. Outside of that, I just like to advocate that policing is a community effort. It's not just the police alone out there. It's the police working hand in hand with the community, which we really try to, ingrain in our officers.
I'll echo what Dean said. I think we have pretty good communities here in Chaffee County. We have pretty good support for law enforcement in this area. And I think a part of that is we've built the trust with the communities, and we're not having the issues that they're having nationally. We're not having excessive use of force complaints, racial profiling, things like that. They're just flat out not happening around here, and we have the data to prove that. With help from the community, I think just more awareness, because the number one thing I hear is when I tell people, like earlier when I talked about drug court or stuff we do with Vista, I think a lot of people just aren't aware of all the stuff we do.
Right.
From the SROs, all the different community partners we have. I think if the public knew more about that and could ask questions and kind of wrap their head around everything we're involved in, I think there'd be a lot more trust within the community, and some of the issues that people may have, we may be tackling already, and they just aren't aware of it. So I think these are good. If we can continue having meetings where we can have dialogue, I think it'll help the community as a whole.
Great. Well, that's one of the purposes of this meeting, was to find out what you all do. And this is a personal opinion. I would encourage you to write a little article for the paper about some of those things that you don't think we're aware of. I did that for the warden too, because they do a lot of stuff at the prison, which our community is not aware of. And, it's all those behind the scenes people that make things run well and a good place to live. And we definitely appreciate your efforts. And it's difficult when a few people, even if it's more than a few people, it's certainly not the majority, give your industry, no matter what dark range or whatever, a black eye. So thank you. Thank all of you for being and going into pretty much everybody's particular questions. And if not, I have their emails, or I'm sure they're on their city sites that you guys can get in touch with them there.
Yeah, you
All
can
right, well, this
definitely
recording on-
get our
Go ahead.
budget. So you can get our budget online. Everything's on OpenGov. It's called opengov.com, and then Salida's entire budget's on there. I'm available anytime for emails, phone calls. If you have any further questions, just get a hold of me.
Okay, great. All right, everybody, you stay safe, and our recording will be posted on the league's website, so you can spread the word to your friends. Give us a few days to get that portion done, if you could. Thank you, and happy holidays to everybody. Thank you again, Chief Morgan and Chief Johnson, for your time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.